Welcome to the Social Priority Podcast. I'm Star Panda, and today we'll be touching on church, state, and you. But first, I have with me a former cop and current YouTube dad, that dang dad. How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on your show. And you can call me Phil.
Oh, okay. I will call you Phil then. So you started your YouTube channel with the idea of having a conversation with people. Have your goals for the channel evolved since then?
Yeah, it was funny. I started right after my daughter was born in 2019, just because I was up late, just kind of, dicking around, and I'd been getting really into YouTube video essayists, and I was like, I'd like to do that. I was kind of wanted to be like an essay writer back in the day.
Mm.
And so I just started, doing what anybody does, which is picking a YouTuber and just completely copying them, beat for beat. In my case, it was Philosophy Tube. I was like, I'm going to be the next Philosophy Tube. And so, I kind of was just doing it for fun. And I thought, I'm sure, maybe I'll get 50 or 100 subscribers somewhere down the road. I had big plans like, I'll probably never happen. But if I ever get 1,000 subscribers, I'll do something special or something like that. My goals when I first started were pretty small. I just thought I want to put some, my other goal was like, I just want to put some good things on YouTube because there's a bunch of bad things on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so I just, wanted to have small, easy conversations, kind of be gentle. I'm not a debate bro or a, screaming about things typically type. This is not my personality. So I wanted to kind of put some of that stuff out there. And, I got very lucky with some people sharing my work that caused my channel to grow much bigger than I ever thought it was ever going to.
Oh, good.
And so I don't know if my goals have changed, because my goal is still to just put nice things on the internet that are thoughtful and give people something to think about. And, I have a pretty wide and kind of diverse audience now. And so I like being able to introduce people to new ideas and with the goal in mind of just creating a better world, a kinder world, a more compassionate world, a more just world. So yeah, and insofar as my goals have changed, it's just more like I feel a bigger responsibility with a bigger audience to do something good with it. I just yesterday, I live in Kentucky, and the eastern part of our state experienced some really torrential storms and flooded some extremely economically depressed parts of Kentucky. People that already get dumped on every other which way, economically and politically and everything else. And now, it's washing their homes away. It's washing their roads away. These are people that don't even sometimes have hospitals, within 50 miles of them. And so, it was one of those things yesterday where I was sharing a fundraiser that they're doing in the eastern part of the state. And I was thinking to myself, what's the point of having 30,000 YouTube subscribers if I can't, get somebody's $1,000 GoFundMe funded? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
What's even the point of having an audience if we can't get a desperate person $1,000? So that's kind of where my goals are, is just to use whatever influence I have to help out.
I pretty much feel the same way. Like, even like with a small audience, I want to do what I can to like help people out in that way. And like, I think even the littlest things, like you putting your videos on YouTube, helps people to see that other perspective that other people might not be able to give. So as a former police officer, did you feel the need to take responsibility for your actions being in that position?
Yeah, when I started the channel, I was trying to be, and it'll sound funny now, but I was trying not to be like overtly political. Like everything's politics, right? Everything's about the allocation of power and how that allocation is protected or disrupted. It's like everything's political. But when I first started, I thought, I'm going to try to like keep it chill and see, just see how it goes, see who's interested, kind of see who I can reach. And so I was trying in the beginning to, pretty much the first year, to just be very subtle about it, not in your face, and not, a lot of times political content can be very, antagonistic. Like, yeah, here's some people that I think suck, and like, and so then with both those people were going to listen to you, they're not now, because you've told what you think about it. But so I thought, I'm going to try to sneak it in, and be a little more subtle about it. And then in mid 2020 was when the George Floyd protests started. And I was already not keen on telling people I used to be a cop, for just, because everybody dislikes and distrusts cops anyway, as they should. And particularly people on the left, so I didn't used to like to talk about it. Didn't want people to really know about it. And then when the George Floyd protests were happening, and I was watching police departments all around the country, not just LAPD, famously brutal police department, not just NYPD, famously brutal, but like everywhere. Buffalo, is supposed to be a progressive part of New York, and Buffalo PD is knocking people over and busting their heads open.
Yeah.
Police departments all around the United States were brutalizing protesters, brutalizing the media, brutalizing legal observers, and with total impunity. And it got to the point where I was just like, I gotta say something. I got to, I have to stand up against this as somebody who used to be on that other side. I have to say, hey, this is wrong, and this is not how it's supposed to be, but from my, experience, my perspective, and my training, here's why it is this way.
Right.
Why are they doing this? Why are they allowed to do this? Why isn't anybody doing anything? So I wanted to give people that kind of perspective, saying, well, here's how we were trained. Here's how juries think about cops. Here's how judges think about cops. And here's why, there's this big tension, kind of among Democrats and liberals and progressives and the left. There's this big tension of, do we reform it, or do we get rid of it? Do we incrementally fix it with training and, committees, or do we chuck the whole thing and start over? And so the perspective I wanted to bring was, based on what I remember and what I experienced when I was a police officer, here's why I don't believe it's reformable. Here's why I don't believe there's incremental changes that are going to work. Here's the cultural aspects of it that I think, whatever solution that you want to devise for what you're seeing, here, let me just tell you, here's how they're trained. Here's how they think. Here's what they're going to do when you give them an extra hour of training during briefing every month. Here's my memory of us just sticking around on our phones and our sergeant signing off that we did the training without ever actually doing it. So,
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that perspective into the mix. So yeah, I did feel responsible for, owning up to it, explaining it to people, and offering my take on how to move forward. If that would seem like the least I could do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So with the training you went through, does it still stick with you in some way, or have you been able to unlearn a lot of the training and mindset?
Yeah, there's some stuff that stays with me. I did a video recently called "How Law Enforcement Broke My Brain," because some of the training, did in kind of a real way break my brain.
Yeah.
A lot of the training that we did was, reminding you over and over and over again, and showing you videos over and over and over again of police officers being killed, so that they could tell you, hey, somebody's going to try to kill you all the time. You're always in danger. You have to do all of these things a certain way, otherwise someone's going to kill you. Basically, like, if you're not, if you go to a restaurant, you have to sit facing the door, otherwise somebody's going to walk in and shoot you in the back. If you're driving in your car, you shouldn't drive parallel with other drivers, because they'll shoot you through the window. Always be ready to be on the attack. Always be ready to be in a fight. Always always have a hair trigger and be ready to rock and roll at a moment's notice. And so, even though I recognize that that was damaging training and, you know, largely incorrect in anybody's normal day-to-day life, those kinds of mental habits and mental pathways are really hard to snap out of, you know, really,
Right.
because you train your brain to operate with a certain, you know, algorithm, a certain heuristic. And so it's not just unlearning a fact, you know, like they'll tell you know, you can learn a fact in school that's wrong, like, oh, you know, Columbus, he what a nice guy that came over to the, you know, to the United States, what a great explorer. Like you can unlearn that and learn like, oh wow, he was a horrible slave driver, you know, just a nasty, even for his own time, was hated by his contemporaries for being such a nasty prick. Like you can unlearn a fact, but it's very hard to unlearn a mental model, you know, a mental
Yeah.
pathway. But you know, I've gotten a little bit better at it. Part of it was just recognizing that I have those pathways, you know, and learning, oh, okay, my brain is working off of programming and I can reprogram it over time. Um, but yeah, other stuff that I've had to unlearn that I've been a little bit more successful at is, you know, part of why police officers are so beloved in kind of conservative circles, or, you know, people that love the status quo, um, is that particularly in the United States, we have such a culture of, you know, there's good guys and there's bad guys. There's people who need to be punished and there's people who need to be rewarded. And when you punish people, you teach them to do right. We in the United States, we have a real culture of like, we can make you moral by punishing you, and suffering will teach you to be moral. And so a lot of what I've had to unlearn is the idea that pain and suffering and punishment are good for you, are good for people, and make better citizens, right? Like that's what we used to think of, you know, and that's what we used to tell ourselves. I worked in a part of Los Angeles County that was um, very economically disadvantaged, very exploited, and thus had a lot of gang and drug activity. You know, and so we were pretty brutal to the gangsters and the drug dealers that we caught. And we would tell ourselves, as we were lumping them up and sending them to the hospital, we would tell ourselves, oh, I'm encouraging them to choose a new path, right? Like they're going to remember this beating, and then they're going to go, you know, they're going to go back to church and go get a job, and, you know, all these things that obviously were not true. So that's been something that I've been more able to recognize, like, oh, that was just a lie. You know, it's just an American myth
Yeah.
that you can punish people into being productive, good citizens. You know, and that the idea of the productive model citizen is itself a pernicious myth that criminalizes and otherizes lots of other people. Those kinds of things have been easier to unlearn. The mental stress stuff, not so much.
Yeah, I believe the US prison system is one of the worst when it comes to recidivism in the world. I'd have to look up specifically, but like I believe it's like one of the worst when it comes to that, because we don't really have any kind of handle on like helping people when they get out of prison. Um, like we just do punishment and then expect them to get better, but like that's not really the way you're supposed to do that, especially since like you lose certain rights after you've been inside the prison system, you know.
Yeah, it's this awful vortex that we suck people into, where it's like, you know, we put communities in an economically precarious position. Some people solve that economic precarity by violating the law. We arrest them, put them in a system that does not equip them to solve their problems in better ways. And then when they get out, we're like, oh, and by the way, you now cannot have 50% of the available jobs in the country because you've been in the system. But don't commit a crime for economic reasons again. You better don't do that again. And it's
Exactly.
like, well, what did we made you worse off than when you started, and then said, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's so it's so it just makes me so angry, I guess,
Yeah.
thinking of the loss of, I say loss of life, not death even, but just the loss of human thriving that we perpetuate for no reason.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Um, so you mentioned before coming on that you grew up in a religious and conservative household. How did you begin to come out of that? And was it anything like unlearning your training and mindset from the police training?
Yeah, I grew up in Orange County, California, which is a pretty affluent. It's a very conservative white enclave in California. I grew up there, and then in Austin, Texas, and in kind of the outskirts of Austin, is where I had a lot of my formative years. And I grew up in a very religious household, very fundamentalist Christianity, old time religion, no instrumental music, no women in positions of authority, very, just very strict. Our Church of Christ was considered liberal because we clapped when somebody got baptized,
Mm.
and other churches of Christ were like, "Oh, that's so inappropriate for the house of God to clap."
Jesus.
Like, so that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a great, yeah, what a great. But just you grow up in it, and you're like, okay, that's normal, I guess. Well, okay, I guess everybody does that or whatever. And so, yeah, I grew up with this. And I grew up with a very old time religion God that was really focused on testing you and pushing you around and seeing what you were made of. And so I now know that as I started to hit puberty and beyond, uh, that that I'm bisexual, but I did not have the lingo for that as a, 10, 11, 12-year old in in a fundamentalist Christian community. I didn't have the words for that.
Right.
And I literally thought that either God was testing me or that the devil was trying to tempt me and get me in trouble. And I just assumed that, oh, this must happen to everybody. Everybody must just have these thoughts come into your head that are wrong, and that's just God seeing if I'm gonna, seeing if he can humble me or something like that. And so um but it was also just this inescapable part of my personality, and I wasn't sure how to square that circle other than to just think, wow, this is the trial God has chosen for me. um but as I hit high school and then especially college, the first time I went to college before I dropped out, um I just started to make friends in other kinds of communities and in other, you know had different kinds of upbringings. And we got out of the super super fundamentalist church and started going to a more relaxed kind of church. And I just started to meet people that didn't fit this rubric that I'd been taught. In Christian, growing up in Christianity, I was taught that everybody is suffering without. If they're not a Christian, everybody's miserable. Anybody who's not a Christian is miserable, and they just can't admit it to themselves, and their life is diminished and they're not thriving. And then I was meeting people who are joyful and happy and thriving who were not Christian and were not interested in it and didn't seem to be missing anything. And I was telling them, "Oh, but you're missing out. Don't you feel a hole in your heart?" And they're like, "No, what are you talking about?" And so, and then, once I got into college, started experimenting with certain relationships and hookups that were forbidden,
Mm.
and just started just trying new things, smoking weed with people, having strange hookups off of Craigslist back when you could do that. Um, I wish my queer awakening hadn't been through Craigslist. I feel like that wasn't the healthiest way to
Yeah,
explore my
probably not.
probably wasn't the healthiest way to explore my budding sexuality, but I used the tools that I had, I guess. But yeah, so it really was just starting to get out into the world, to meet new people, to hear from people that didn't fit what I'd been taught. And then, in the same way that getting out of law enforcement, there's a catchphrase you hear sometimes: kill the cop in your head. That we're in the United States in particular, we are raised with cop brain. There's good guys and bad guys, people that need to be punished. I'm going to call the cops and punish them. In the same way, it's almost like I had to kill the God in my head that I thought was watching me and judging me and tempting me and punishing me and stuff like that. I just kind of had to set that aside and be okay with, just living as best I can. And there were certain lessons that we were taught in Christianity that were good. Help the poor, feed the hungry. I talk about, there's a verse in the book of Matthew that talks about the sheep and the goats. The sheep are the good guys and the goats are the bad guys. And the sheep feed the hungry, they clothe the naked, they tend to the sick, they visit those in prison. And the goats are the ones who don't do those things. And so it's like, I've taken those lessons, to always look in their community for the least of these, who's struggling in your community, who's been denied access, who's on an out group, who's been othered, and help them and be in solidarity with them. Those lessons have stuck with me, and other ones I have set aside.
Well, good. I'm glad you could find some sort of like equilibrium with that. There seems to be a huge problem with religion being post hoc injected into places where they were not intended to be. What has been your view of the current happenings in the Supreme Court and state congresses, stuff like that?
Yeah, I grew up in the church that I grew up in Texas was very pro-life, and so the first ever activism I ever remember participating in was pro-life marches in Central Texas, particularly in Austin, and it was something that was so it was just something that people were so passionate about, I guess, and something that was really it seemed to drive a lot of emotion and drive a lot of activity was the abortion issue in particular. And I think, as I got out of, I became pro-choice well before I left the church entirely. I was a pro-choice, pro-gay Christian, closeted bi pro-gay Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But and there were a lot of Christians. I remember going to church with a lot of Christians towards the end that were not pro-life. They were not fundamentalist in that way, and they were not the word I would use for our current political situation. I think the buzzword would be a dominionist. Dominionist Christianity tends to be the Christians like, your Ted Cruz's that want to essentially impose Christian orthodoxy on secular politics.
Right.
And, a lot of the churches that I went to towards the end were not like that. And so, yeah, I think about that a lot. Where did all of this vigor come from? Where did all of this, this energy come from? Because, when I was participating in pro-life marches as a kid, what we weren't doing was bringing guns to a Capitol building or threatening to kidnap the governor of Michigan. We were not, I know there were abortion clinic bombings back then, but, even our church that was super pro-life condemned the abortion clinic bombings. We're like, hey, we're pro-life. That includes the doctors doing it. Like, you can't
Yeah.
kill, you can't kill an abortion doctor because you're pro-life. So even our church was not hardline, militant about that. It was just our kind of our personality and our, our doctrine.
They actually tried to
And
be pro-life instead of just
right,
anti-abortion.
exactly. And so I racked my brain thinking about like what happened. The church I grew up in, the people that I went to church with, a person like Donald Trump was so abhorrent to them at the time. I mean, he represented everything that people hated in churches that I grew up in.
Mhm.
But then to see those same people that I grew up with in church happily voting for him 20 years later was a real mindfuck, I gotta say.
Yeah.
It really depressed me. It really like shocked me, because I used to, even when I got out of Christianity, I used to say, hey, everybody, we've all got our values, and they believe a certain thing, and it's just, don't worry about it. But then to watch what happened, and I'm like, oh wow, there were serious consequences. Holy shit, there's a Christo-fascist uprising in this country right now. Where did that come from? My theory, is that I think conservative Christianity relies on a lot of national myth making and a lot of stories that they tell themselves about the country and about God and about the future, Christian destiny or whatever. The United States, it's a beacon of freedom, the land of economic opportunity. You can be anything you want to be. We're a moral country of law and order, all these things. And then to watch capitalism crumbling before our eyes in real time, to watch the American project fall apart right in front of your eyes, to watch everything that you've believed in and told yourself for so long proven wrong, like just proven wrong, like, uh, trickle down Reaganomics, an absolute lie, like a theory that was proven wrong definitively.
And we're still
You know,
clinging to it.
absolutely. And it's so painful to believe in something so hard and then have to face the reality that it was wrong. And so my theory is that this is the death spasm of American Christian capitalism. Like, this is the last, this is the last lurch of the corpse, or the last gasp, the last desperate clawing for air from a bunch of people who have had to and are refusing to confront the collapse of the American myth. And instead of, I had to confront that too, and it was painful and it was hard. And for a long time, I didn't want to admit it. But then I don't know, I just had to look around at the misery and the precarity around me and think like, okay, all right, I fucked up. I was wrong. I said a bunch of dumb stuff when I was in my 20s. I believed a bunch of dumb stuff when I was in my 20s. Okay, moving on. How do we fix this? What do we do now? Let's get to it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just can't do that, and they're not in a culture that rewards and allows that. One thing that I always tell people who might not have grown up religious is that particularly conservative Christianity rewards certainty. It rewards inflexibility. It rewards a dogged commitment to one idea in the face of all, opposition. And so part of what makes a good conservative Christian is sticking to your guns no matter what. And so it makes sense to me that, you can see that happening in government now with the Christians that are taking over government now. I hate to say it's pointless to debate them, because you can always reach people, you know what I mean? Like, you should try to reach people, but like, it's kind of pointless to debate them on Twitter, where I was trying to catch them out and, you said something wrong, or you said a fact that's wrong, where I was trying to catch people out on Twitter, and it's like, they don't care. That's not
Yeah.
motivating.
Yeah, they're so entrenched in that kind of belief that I don't think reasoning really gets through that. Like, it's more of a I guess a more intimate process that you need to go through for something that deep and rooted in yourself to get out of, you know?
Yeah, and I think it does. I mean, it does come down to relationships. I do think you know meeting meeting queer people, for one, helped me, uh, you know, admit my own queerness. But like, even when I was trying to be stringent, you know, super stringent anti-queer Christian, just making friends and meeting queer people and seeing like, oh, these are just people trying to live their life. It's not a big conspiracy to take down America. I mean, it kind of is now, but in a good way. But it was just meeting normal people and going like, oh, these people are not my enemy, right? Like we share the same desires and goals and fears, and they get sick just like I do, and they have to work to feed their families just like I do. I think that's a big part of it. I also think that a lot of conservative Christians are insulated from, or feel insulated from, the precarity that is coming for all of us. My parents are wealthy white Christians who live in a HOA community. They live 20 miles away from the epicenter of this crisis in America, right? Like it's so, but they're insulated from it. It hasn't reached them yet.
Yeah.
And so I think, but my sister and I are much closer to that, and we have both. My sister, my sister has become a real real leftoid, and that should terrify any conservative Christian out there because she was all in, super Christian, super committed to it, super just, and not political. She was like, oh, politics, I don't know, it's all so messy. I just believe in God and all this. And somehow even she got sucked out of it. And now she's talking about moving out of the country to raise her daughter somewhere else.
That's
I
completely
think,
fair.
right? Yeah, so, yeah, same here. We're looking at the same things. And I think my parents are now seeing my sister and I screaming at them, to some extent, like things are not okay. This wave of misery is coming. It hasn't even reached us yet. I'm insulated from it. I have a great job. I'm very, very lucky. I'm a homeowner. I make plenty of money. I'm extremely lucky in life. And even I can see the dark water rising close to where I live, and so we're screaming to our parents like, this is not okay. It's not getting better. It's not fixing itself. So I think you have to see it, I guess. And so I think that's the only thing that can get through to people is when they finally see, oh my God, like I can't deny it anymore. The water has risen to my doorstep.
Yeah. My parents were somewhat the same way. Very Christian, very dogmatic, and like trying to keep me on the right path and all that. And I think in the same way that a lot of people get out of sort of the fundamentalist religious mindset, my mom actually helped me get out of that unintentionally. um I remember back in I think it was middle school, my teacher had given us like a questionnaire of like, I guess, beliefs for us. Um and one of the questions that really stuck with me was, do it was something like, do gay people deserve the same rights as straight people, or something like that. And I went home um not really sure what I should believe, because I usually look towards my parents, or I did look towards my parents for guidance and stuff that I was unsure on. So I went to my mom and I asked her, "Hey, what should I believe on this?" And she's like, "Yeah, everybody should have their rights. Like everyone should be equal." And I guess unintentionally she uh instilled in me this belief that everybody, like, being gay or trans or black or white or anything, should be equal, equitable, and all that stuff. And it really stuck with me. And now I've turned gay and trans, and yeah, I feel like um just those personal relationships that you get into, you, like, if someone gets into a personal relationship, not even like dating or anything like that, but like even just friends or family, if you get close to people who are maybe in that kind of headspace with that like fundamentalist mindset, I think it would be easier to just like ease them into like different ways of thinking. um but yeah, I don't know. What do you think would be a good way to help other people who are in, like, maybe even on the edge of being a fundamentalist Christian in that way?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think, I mean, obviously it goes without saying, everybody's different. Everybody's kind of come from different spots. I for me, one of the so in my day job, I was a few years back, I was a digital marketer, and then got into like web design stuff. And anyway, no one cares. But all that to say, I was going to some design conferences and some big, just this kind of industry conferences for a while. And I randomly took in one of the conferences, I randomly did a session with somebody who was they were doing basically a training session on workplace sort of change management and workplace politics, essentially. It kind of, because one thing when you're a designer and you're in charge of anything at work, a lot of times you have to you're in charge of something that someone else uses for their job, for their day job, and you might have to make a decision to change that. And this will shock you, but some people don't like that when you change up how they do things. And
Yeah.
so this was a training session on how to do kind of change management in a helpful, productive way. And the speaker said something that really stuck with me, that I've taken with me. She said, it's sort of conventional wisdom that people fear change, but in my experience, that's not true. People fear loss. People love people change all the time. They try new hairstyles, they try new restaurants. People love change when it's fun, but they fear loss. And so that's that's the root that you have to be respectful of and cognizant of when you are trying to manage change, is that you are threatening people with a loss. And people, there's also in game theory and in sociology, we know that there's a concept called loss aversion. um, a, a potential gain feels, how do you say this the right way? If somebody is facing a potential gain, it feels pretty good. And if somebody is facing a commensurate potential loss, it feels twice as bad as the gain would feel good, so to speak.
Yeah.
People hate losing things. It feels really bad. And we have a psychological aversion to it that is powerful and undeniable, I guess. And so all that to say, part of what I've tried to do when I'm trying to persuade people, particularly conservatives or people that are kind of coming from that frame of mind, is one of the first things I try to do is I try to say, I want you to understand, I'm not trying to take things away from you. I'm not trying to make your life worse. I always tell people, in my ideal society after the revolution, you have more, you don't have less. because you're not a CEO of an oil company, you don't have
Yeah.
less. That guy I'm going to take away a lot from. But you, Mr. Working Class, living in the burbs, in my ideal world, you have more. And let me explain that to you. Let me explain why you actually have less than you should now. So that's where I try to start, is to try to get in front of people's loss aversion and to try to show them, hey, I think you deserve better. I think you're being treated bad now. I think you're living in a world that doesn't respect you, that doesn't dignify you, that robs you of what you're entitled to as a human being. And let me show you that. And we may disagree down the road, but at least we're not going to. I think that at least graduates me from your enemy to your, just a guy you don't agree with, right? Like, because I think that's why you look at the conservative militancy against anybody to the left of John McCain. They're ready to string him up from the gallows, and it's like, wow, how could they feel so violently about somebody that just wants to give them fucking healthcare? Right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But it's because we see that we want to give them something that has been taken away from them by the rich and the powerful. But they hear and they have been told they're coming for you. The commies are coming to take away your rights, and they want you to live in a commune where you don't even have your own toothbrush. And it's like, no, that's not. That's not what
Everyone has
saying.
to share the same toothbrush. No one gets to use a different one.
Yeah, we're all just gonna wear. We're all gonna wear. Yeah, we're all gonna wear the same color coveralls and worship the deer leader. And it's like, no. So I don't know if that fits everyone's situation, but I think that's advice that I try to give people is like, think about the person you're talking to. What are they afraid of losing? What do they think you're about to take from them? And maybe you can say it in a different way that shows that you are not trying to take things away from people.
Yeah, the healthcare was a really good example, actually. I think particularly on the messaging that we have in politics, like when the Republicans were trying to say, hey, we want to repeal and replace Obamacare. And that didn't sit right with a lot of people because they were going to take something away from them. So, like, in that kind of mindset that you were talking about with the loss, I think a lot of people just instilled that because they were losing that healthcare and they had no idea what it would be replaced with. I don't know if the same thing could be applied to Medicare for all, because we're people who want Medicare for all are literally they just want everyone to have healthcare. But then, like, I think people who are against it associate it with some kind of socialist or communist system, even though we have the same thing for Medicare and Medicaid and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people are getting more on board with like Medicaid expansion and stuff like that. And I think we might get there pretty soon if like everything gets aligned in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, my Republican dad is getting on board with universal health care because he had a heart attack last year, and his brother had a heart attack the year prior. And so they've all been in and out of the healthcare system for a while now, and suddenly the flaws of the system have been laid bare for these powerful men, and they're like,
right, yeah,
yeah. And it's I think so when I used to listen to a lot of conservative talk radio, and one of the ones I used to love was the Dennis Miller show. Embarrassing now because he's embarrassing, but at the time, for a conservative, he was pretty funny, because conservatives are not funny, but he was kind of funny. But he used to say, oh, people, they want socialized medicine. It's just going to be the DMV with wounds. And I remember thinking that was such a funny way to say it. But I think to your point, the loss that conservatives interpret in something like a Medicare for all is like, oh, I'm not going to have the freedom to go to the doctor when I want to go. I'm going to have to go. I'm going to get told where to go. I'm not going to have a choice. But also to your point, I think that illusion is falling away because who's got choice? Like, what choice do you have? Like,
Right.
you have the insurance that your employer gives you. You have whatever doctor takes that within 20 miles of your house, and you have whatever medication they'll prescribe to you that is covered. You know what I mean? Like, you have no choice now. You have less choice, and it's expensive. You're paying. Yeah, I heard this phrase a while back. I can't remember who said it, but I love it. He said, Americans, nobody but Americans pays more to receive less, or nobody pays more to receive less than Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And
Definitely
it's
rings
so
true.
yeah, it's just so true in medicine. Like, there is, I remember when Obama was trying to pass Obamacare, and he was so afraid of upsetting people, and he kept saying in speeches, you can keep your doctor. Let me be clear, you can keep your doctor. And now I'm like, who cares? Like, keep my doctor. What are you even talking about? I don't have a doctor. I have this 1950s idea of the family doctor that's known you for 20 years since you were a baby. It's gone. It's dead.
Yeah, we don't have that anymore. The same thing with the healthcare. Like, it's not really you right now who chooses which doctor, which like, even in some instances it's not even the insurance that you get to choose yourself. Like, your job chooses your insurance chooses your doctor, and your insurance chooses where you can get your medication. Like, recently I had issues with my insurance trying to force me onto what's it called, Express Scripts, and I had so many issues with them. Like, it was just a nightmare trying to deal with them. So I transferred it to my prescriptions to or at least I tried to transfer my prescriptions to a different place, like CVS or something. And it was just such a hassle, and like, all of this stuff could be solved if we had that kind of Medicare for all universal health care system, where we could be the ones to choose our destiny, in a matter of speaking.
Yeah, my partner has ADHD, and there's a medication that works for her called Vyvanse, and it works like a charm. And she first got it because her doctor had a bunch of samples, and he just kept giving her samples. And she was like, wow, this is the only medication that works for my ADHD. And our insurance won't cover it because it's technically like an antipsychotic or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's something else in their way of thinking about it. So, like, well, you're not psychotic, so you can't have it. And she's like, but it cures my thing. Like, this medicine cures my thing. Why can't I have it? And they're like, shut up. And so it's like, we can't afford medicine that works for her because of a fucking classification difference. What a stupid system.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of bureaucracy really fucks things up like that. But yeah, I think I believe, or not believe, but like, I think a lot of fundamentalist Christians would probably be on board with that. But like, the Republican Party absolutely is not, which doesn't make sense to me. Like, what do you think about like Christians not believing in Medicare for all, even though like that was basically what Jesus wanted?
Yeah. Yeah, the name of the guy who named the religion was pretty famous for Medicare for all.
Yeah.
For universal health care.
Literally healing people for no other reason than healing them.
Yeah. So it's so frustrating. The Republican Party understands power in a way that the Democrat Party either doesn't or chooses not to, or I have my opinions about that. But the Republican Party understands power, and they understand loss aversion, and they understand once you give somebody something, you cannot take it away. They will hate you for it. And so they understand that once you give people the freedom, freedom of medicine, once you give people the freedom to just get medical treatment, employers cannot hang that over their heads. Um, Drug companies can't enrich themselves in the same way that they're doing now. Um, Hospital administrators can't enrich themselves the way they're doing now. The people that fund the Republican Party understand that once people have the freedom, the freedom to treat themselves, the golden goose is going to stop laying eggs for a lot of people. And so I honestly think that a lot of the rank and file Republican people on the ground are really just the victims of a very sophisticated propaganda campaign, um, that is driven by pure greed, by pure greed. And I hate to take away people's agency or say that, well, there's some, they don't, they're just these stupid, you know what I mean? I don't want to say like, oh, they're just the ignorant masses. They'll, it's, I'm sure some of them really are sincere in their beliefs, but like the stories that, the things that the things that your average Republican repeats about the healthcare system. Like I said, my dad is a rich Republican, and even he's getting on board with universal healthcare because it's so obvious now to even the rank and file that it's a lie, that it's and that it's not tenable, it's not sustainable. Like the levels of medical debt in this country are out of control, and it is a it has a stranglehold on this country. In this country that we're the greatest country on earth, and we just happen to have the highest infant mortality and the highest maternal mortality rates. Anywhere in the wealthy parts of the world, we're doing the worst. And I think it's just so, the contradictions of capitalism have been laid bare too much to even deny it anymore. And so I think you are going to start to see the Republican Party try to hijack universal healthcare in some way. I mean, you're already seeing it with somebody like an Andrew Yang that wants to do some form of like universal basic income. What they're going to try to do is they're going to try to give you UBI and then get rid of all the other kinds of welfare. It's okay. They're going to try to give you a stipend and then get rid of all the other kind of safety nets, and they're going to try to do it that way, I think, is what you're going to see. But yeah, I think there's there's a high concentration of wealthy people that are really good at telling suburban moms and dads a plausible story about why they don't deserve to get medicine that cures their illnesses, but I think it's just falling apart so badly that I don't think that's long for this world. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I do think that kind of the way of thinking is starting to fall away a little bit. Sort of in the same vein as the Medicare for all stuff and healthcare and all that. Did you hear about the recent bill that most, if not all, of the Republicans had voted against for the aid for veterans?
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. So basically, Republicans had blocked this bill that was going to push aid, like money for I can't remember what specifically it was.
They were exposed to chemicals in like a burn pit or something.
Yeah,
it was some chemical exposure.
Yeah, it was supposed to help for that, and I believe it was supposed to be like for more than that, like the VA and stuff like that, to help veterans who had those kinds of illnesses caused by the wars and stuff like that, and specifically those burn pits that they had. Um, and it basically was quashed in the Senate um, by looks like 14 Republicans. Um, excuse me. Uh, so yeah, this is really odd, but like I was hearing that they had flipped because let's see. They had flipped because Joe Manchin and Schumer had figured out a compromise to I guess relabel Build Back Better and then put it through so Joe Biden could get his stuff done. And then the Republicans, figuring out what was going on, just torpedoed this for no reason other than spite. So, like, I don't see what their gain is for this, because they're supposed to be the party of, like, veterans and the military and all that. But on the face of it, it looks like they're just immediately getting, like, rocked by the way this looks, because Jon Stewart immediately came out against what the Republicans were doing. But yeah, what do you think about what was happening?
Yeah, so we're in a. This goes back to my frustration with the Democrat Party. So I was saying earlier, Republicans, they understand power, they understand how to get it, they understand how to hang on to it. When the Democrats are in power, they can't get anything done, and when the Republicans are out of power, they seem to get everything done.
Yeah.
Regardless. And I think what the Republicans have realized, and it's interesting, and I'm conflicted about it, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I think what they've realized is that all of these, the entire Republican worldview is falling apart. Like I said, capitalism is collapsing in front of our eyes. The American myth is collapsing. Everyone can see it. No one's happy. Everyone's miserable. And so these are dangerous times if you are invested in the status quo, because the status quo is not working for, I would say, a critical mass of people. But Americans are so propagandized, and there's so much just cultural inertia that for now we're riding with it. But dangerous times if you are invested in the status quo, which the Republican Party is. And so what they have figured out is that even though their policies don't work, if they can make enough people disinterested in electoral politics, they can kind of hang on to power anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so what all the Republican Party can do is make sure that the Democrat Party doesn't get anything done. Like that's the plan, is to prove that the Democrats will not make your life better, because the Democrats don't have a good story. The Republicans do have a good story. But by that I mean the Republican story is your classic Umberto Eco fascism, like straight out of the fascism playbook. The Republicans have a good story. Hey, this used to be a great country, but the country is degenerate. There are enemies on all sides. The Republican Party will protect you. We're going to keep you safe from your enemies. The enemies have a plot to take out this country. The enemies have a plot to take away the country that you know and love. We're going to protect you. Like, it's wrong and it's fascist, but it's a good story, and it's a story that people can buy into. The Democrats have no story. Their story is, decorum and bipartisanship, and then there's just gonna, because any big story about social change, the Democrats aren't interested in, because they get paid by the same people that pay the Republicans. They're all the same donors.
Yeah.
And so the Democrat Party doesn't have a soul right now. And, I don't mean that necessarily as an insult, but it's just they're not. Well, I do mean it as an insult. They don't believe in anything. There are policy choices that, like, they're nominally pro-abortion, they're nominally pro-environment, such as it is for them, and nominally pro-social. They want some kind of safety net, but it's not wrapped up in a story. It's not wrapped up in a narrative that works for people. And so I think the Republicans have identified that their narrative will keep their voters showing up at the polls. So all they have to do is make sure that no one shows up for Democrats. And it's working. I mean, the Democrat Party is polling terribly. Nobody wants Joe Biden to run again. The plan is working. And I say that as somebody who recognizes that that is the plan, and who is also extremely over electoral politics right now. And I'm really conflicted about it, because I know I'm being manipulated. I know that's the plan, is to make me feel bad the way that I feel right now. And I still do, and so, so when I look at something like that, you're like, oh, I thought Republicans are the party of the veterans. Well, they are, except they will throw anyone under the bus to hang on to power. And the way to hang on to power is to do nothing, is to make sure nothing gets done.
Yeah, that's very well said. I definitely agree with Democrats not having any sort of, like, I guess, platform. Well, they have a platform, but they, like, don't have anything for you to vote for. Like, they say they'll do all these things, but, like, they're not helping themselves when the Republicans actually stop their platform by literally not doing anything at all when they do stop things from happening. Like, they could be speaking out and even using their own platforms to call out Republicans would be very helpful, because, like, you're actually talking about it instead of staying silent and doing nothing. And, like, the Democrats just aren't helping themselves when they just stay away from certain subjects or, stuff like that. And
it's my big frustration, and I think it's, I don't know what to do about it, as I don't know if I'd call myself an activist. I guess I am, but I don't know what to do about it, because and my problem is, my theory about that is, I'm somebody who I would say has, like, anarchist leanings, anarcho-communist leanings, but I there's a lot, as I've studied anarchism, that I like, and that I find resonates with me. And one of their things is a critique of power and a critique of hierarchy, and just a suspicion about power and who has power over who. And so when I look at the U.S. government, when I look at the Supreme Court, I see these seats of power. I see people who have immense power to do evil. And I look at it and I think, I don't think anybody should have that power. I don't think anybody should have that much power to ruin lives. But the Democrats look at that power and they go, we should have that power. And so the Democrats will not offer a critique that threatens the system. They will not do things that harm decorum. You know what I mean? Like, they're all the Democrats are all friends with the Republicans. Like, that's what really is frustrating to me, is, like, it's the old George Carlin quote. It's a big club and you ain't in it. The federal Dems and the federal GOP, they're friends, and they share the same desire to control the machine. The Republicans want to use the machine to kill everybody, and the Democrats want to use the machine to make themselves rich, and if they can help some people along the way, great. So they're not doing anything to damage the machine, but the machine is what's killing us. Like, the machine is what is harming us. And so I want, say what you want about Beto O'Rourke, he's whatever. He was whatever when he was running for president, but he actually showed up and disrupted the Greg Abbott speech in the wake of the Uvalde shooting.
Right.
There was he disrupted the system. He was indecorous. And I was like, hell yes, thank you. Like, that's all I'm asking for is just get noisy. Like, fuck some shit up, turn some tables over, call some people names, call someone an asshole, in the congressional record. I kick down a vote for that. Like, I want to know that you are willing to damage the site of power a little bit so that fascists can't have it. Because what I don't want, and what always happens, is the Democrats work really, really hard to seize that site of power again, and then they lose it. And they lose it back to an even worse version of the Republicans. So it's like, we need to start talking about damaging the site of power. We need to stop. We need to stop building this huge weapon that the Republicans keep getting their hands on. You know what I mean? I'm just so frustrated that the Democrats won't even take a bullet out of the gun, knowing that the Republicans are going to wrestle it out of their hands again in 4 or 8 years.
I think the main problem with Democrats is that I think they see their whole purpose as maintaining the status quo.
100%.
Yeah, like last year, I never thought that I would be singing Beto O'Rourke's praises, but with the Uvalde shooting, he has been stepping up, doing what a governor should be doing, and standing up to Greg Abbott, and just, like, I guess telling him, like, you're doing this wrong. You shouldn't be doing it this way. And he's exactly right. And we need more people like that in government who aren't afraid of getting in the way of the status quo. Because, like, the status quo is killing us. Like, there's no way around it. Like, we're not being protected. The status quo isn't maintaining us, it's maintaining itself. And I think we need to get out from under it and deal with it finally.
Yeah, like so people criticize Joe Biden because he is rebuilding Trump's, racist border wall. But if you ever say that online, all these people who apparently name search for Joe Biden criticism all day will flood your mentions. And they'll go, actually, you need to learn some civics because the court told Joe Biden he had to rebuild the wall. And I always want to tell these people, okay, well, then he should just not do it. Tell the court to go fuck off. Like, what are they going to do? Is the Supreme Court going to go arrest Joe Biden? Of course they're not. Joe Biden, if he wanted to, could tell the court, no, and make me. But he'll never do that because that would disrupt the illusion of the great American product, or project or whatever. It's just so frustrating because, like, you could do it. We always talk about. Sorry, I'm getting off on a rant here.
It's okay.
People always, we look backwards at these events in history. We look at something like. We look at something like the Holocaust, where there was this legal apparatus that was abusing people, and you always see conservatives always be the first one to say, "I would have hid people in my basement. I would have hid people in my attic. Let me tell you what I would have done if I would have been." They'll always tell you, "I would have absolutely violated the law to protect human life." But you're not doing it now. Like, you're not. Okay, great, do that now. Like, show up and violate the law to protect human life today. And oh no, it's different. It's different now. It's like, I know, and it would have been different then, and it's always going to be different. Like, it's so frustrating. We have this self mythology, like, oh, I would have been one of the good ones, and it's like, I don't know that a lot of us would have been one of the good ones.
Yeah, it seems like we treat the law as God instead of, like, the law.
Instead of a human construction that can be changed.
Yeah, like, the Constitution was literally meant to be a living document, and we're supposed to be able to change it when the times call for it. But there are all these people standing in the way of that, including the Democrats, going along with the Republicans to stop us from like trying to amend things and get things done. Um, I will say that the Democrats have been trying to like put things into law that should be, like the abortion stuff and voting rights and stuff like that. But like they've had so many chances to do it, and they're just now trying when there's a wall in front of them, you know.
Yeah, it's the. I mean, it's really just. I would say it's insulting the intelligence of the electorate, but maybe it's not because the electorate doesn't have it. But we have 50 senators right now that are Democrat. Joe Biden keeps saying, "Give me 2 more senators, and I'll get all this stuff done." But Obama had 56, and he didn't
Yeah,
get these things done with 56.
exactly.
So you're telling me in 2022 we can get done with 52 what the most popular, groundbreaking, biggest movement, guy with the biggest mandate, the thing that guy couldn't get done, the popular guy, Sleepy Joe Biden's going to get done with 4 less. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of lies, just telling us we just need a little more when you had a little more and you're not doing anything with it. So, yeah, I it's very difficult to believe in the Democratic Party, but I think we do have a chance of getting more people in who will do something that we need done. Um, Very specifically, if we want to have like if we want to have some examples, there is John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. This guy is a powerhouse right now. Um, just beating Dr. Oz on all fronts. And
Yeah, it ain't even fair.
yeah.
it's ugly.
Yeah. And he I don't want to jinx it, but like it seems like he's one of those people who will get stuff done. And people like that I want in Congress helping us preserve the future. And yeah, it's just it I see the hope, and I also see those people trying to get in the way of that hope.
Yeah, it's something that I I meditate on a lot, and I'm conflicted about a lot because on the one hand, like, let me be I'm doing an Obama now. Let me be clear. Um, if voting, particularly voting for Democrats, is part of your harm reduction strategy, for what anybody listening, you take stock of the world, you look at the tools at hand, and you think, like, okay, voting for Democrats, that's part of my strategy, among other things. Great. Never, I would never tell people not to vote. I would never tell people that they're stupid for voting, for Democrats or whatever. Um, what I'm conflicted about is when I think about harm reduction, I think, okay, system's falling apart, you know, and at the risk of sounding like an accelerationist, or some, commie LARPer that wants to, roam the streets with a gun or whatever, at the risk of sounding like that, I wonder, or I'm conflicted about whether or not to just get it over with, or whether, you know, I guess it's the question of, like, okay, if we do put enough good people in enough good spots, will they fix it? Or are they prolonging the inevitable and we should just get on with it and get on to the next chapter, which is going to be painful and it's going to suck, but maybe we just need to rip the Band-Aid and go? Or is that fatalism? Is that nihilism? Am I completely black-pilled? And actually, if we just put enough right people in just enough right spots, they can fix it and cure it. And I don't know. I'm really conflicted about it. And I just don't know. But
I think we had that same kind of thought going around during the what was it? The During the Trump presidency. Um a lot of There were a lot of leftists who were thinking like maybe if we just let it happen, then it'll get better eventually. But I don't think that's true. Um if you see what the Republicans are doing now, like even in state legislatures, they're taking away people's rights anyways, even if like people don't want that. Like we definitely do need people in the right places because if they maintain power in those places, then they're not going to stop. They're just going to keep going and take away as many rights from like certain demographics as they can so they can stay in power. Um
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's
yeah.
pure evil. I mean, it's pure evil. I guess.
I get where you're coming from. Like don't get me wrong. It's just um every time I do think about it, it's just like I'm the perfect subject to like
Right.
have all of my rights taken away, you know? Uh but yeah, um so
Yeah, no, and for sure, and I never want to minimize that, and I never one of my mantras I try to live by is I never treat people like collateral damage. You know what I mean? Like, well,
yeah.
we got to break a few eggs to make this omelet. You know, I never treat people. I try not to ever treat people that way. I guess it's something for me where I'm like, I guess what I'm afraid of, my big fear is that the current iteration of the Democrat Party is a is in cahoots with the current iteration of the Republican Party. And what I'm afraid of is that they're working together to make all of this evil possible. And like I want to take it, I want to take the keys to the car away from all of them. And maybe that's unrealistic, you know, it's idealistic thinking, but it's like I want to take all of these weapons away from these people. The weapons that they're using against you, the weapons that, you know, after they're done with you, they're going to come for me. And after they're done with me, they're going to come for the next. You know what I mean? Like, I want to
Yeah.
take these weapons away. You know, and again, maybe that's just not possible. But that's more where my like I'm not an accelerationist in the sense like I want to make it worse so that people rise up. Like I
Yeah.
don't. You know, I don't want to make it worse, but you know, I'm afraid. I'm afraid, you know, and part of what makes me afraid is like you look at even the Democrats are way into this like surveillance state shit. They're way into like partnering with this like technocracy, you know, Google and you know all these companies that want to spy on you, and Amazon with the Ring Cam. Like you think of like Amazon is supposed to be selling you books and mugs, and instead they're one of the most sophisticated surveillance apparatuses operating in the United States. How the hell did we let that happen? You know what I mean? Like, so that's what I'm afraid that all of them are consolidating power behind this you know this techno future that we're, you know, the robots, the dancing robots that we keep seeing, and everybody's telling you like they're gonna put guns on those robots, right? Like you know that, right?
And then they did.
Like I'm Yeah, and then they did. You know, I'm afraid, you know, I
I
think
th-
that's just my big fear, but I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
think I get it. I think what you're alluding to is like we're the frogs and they're turning up the heat ever so slightly so we don't jump out. And yeah, I get that. Like I feel that way too in some instances, but we do have to I think we have to remember that they are human and like not all of them are trying to make our lives hell, you know.
That's
Um
true. Yeah.
there are some people in Congress like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, soon to be John Fetterman, who really want the working class to be in a better place, like the working class and poor, I should say. Um, and I think that we really will have, um, I think we will be in a better place if we try to get those people into those positions of power who really do want that kind of change. Probably a good idea would be putting more restrictions on that power. But like that's something that we'd have to deal with later on when we get people in power who are willing to make those choices.
Yeah, and yeah, and to your point, I do want to say, for all this doomer talk, here in Kentucky, again, really frustrating me with the Democrats. We had a guy named Charles Booker who was running in a primary against a gal named Amy McGrath. And Amy McGrath was presenting herself as sort of the rational, moderate choice. She was presenting herself as a pro-Trump Democrat.
Oh, God, I remember her. She was trying to go to the right of McConnell.
Yes, she was saying Mitch McConnell didn't love Trump enough.
Oh, my God.
And the Democrat machine supported her over Charles Booker because she was supposed to be, quote unquote, more electable in Kentucky. But let me tell you, driving around, and I live in Louisville, which is, one of the 3 liberal parts of Kentucky. Driving around Louisville, I didn't see a single Amy McGrath sign during the primary. No one had an Amy McGrath sign. I saw Charles Booker signs everywhere.
Yeah.
Like that dude was popular on the ground with real people, but he wasn't popular with the Democrat machine. But anyway, he's running again against Rand Paul,
Ooh.
Rand Paul, complete monster, total douchebag. I would have absolutely no problem casting a vote for Charles Booker. The dude is legit. I mean, he's a legit activist, legit cares about people. He's somebody that I know to be sincere. So, for all my tough talk, somebody like a Charles Booker, somebody like a John Fetterman, somebody like an AOC. Yes, I just want to show me some sincerity, show me some fire. Beto, probably a complete lib squish any other day of the week, but like he shed some fire and he fucked some shit up, and like that's all I'm asking for is just show me that you care. Show me that you are not part of the Democrat money laundering wing. Show me that you're part of the Democrat governance wing, and I'll show up. Like, I'm totally happy to support people that don't just want to get rich off donations. You know what I mean? Like, just show up for people and we'll show up for you,
Exactly. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. That was a really good conversation.
Yeah, it was fun. I appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me.
If you want to shout yourself out, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, so I do YouTube as That Dang Dad. It's a mishmash of all kinds of topics. I've been on a music kick lately, so if you want to hear me talk about Run the Jewels or Rage Against the Machine, my next video will probably be about video games. So I try to keep it fresh. But yeah, That Dang Dad on YouTube, and then on Twitter, I'm That Dang Phil. Because I'm really good at branding, and I wanted to make sure I had different ways to. I want to make sure I have different names so it confuses people. But yeah, I would love to have people chat me up on Twitter. I try to be pretty chill and approachable, and try to have a nice brand on the old internet. So I run a nice comment section on YouTube. I run a nice Twitter for the most part, quote unquote. But yeah, I just appreciate you having me on. This was a great conversation. Thank you for thinking of me.
Yeah, no problem.